The emergency room doctor's words still echo in my head 3 months later. Mrs. Rodriguez, what happened to your daughter wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately tried to harm her. We're required by law to report this as attempted murder. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if the story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Christmas morning 2023 was supposed to be magical for our family. Instead, it became the day I realized the woman I'd called Mom for 8 years had been planning to hurt my 5-year-old daughter Emma all along. Moving to Denver in 2019 felt like starting fresh. After my divorce from Emma's father, I needed a new beginning somewhere far from the painful memories of California. I was 28, working as a graphic designer, and determined to build a stable life for Emma and myself. That's when I met David at a coffee shop in Cherry Creek. He was kind, patient with Emma, and came from what seemed like a close-knit family. David's mother, Patricia Whitmore, appeared to be everything I'd hoped for in a mother-in-law. She was 62, retired from her career as a school principal, and seemed genuinely excited about welcoming Emma and me into their family. When David and I got engaged in 2020, Patricia insisted on helping plan the wedding. She wanted to be involved in every detail, from the flowers to the menu to Emma's flower girl dress. "Sarah, honey, I've been waiting my whole life for a daughter," Patricia would say, pulling me into one of her suffocating hugs. "And now I get a granddaughter too? We're going to be so close." At first, her attention felt overwhelming but sweet. She'd show up unannounced with groceries, volunteer to babysit Emma, and constantly offer advice about everything from my career to my parenting. David thought it was wonderful that his mother was so involved. He'd grown up as an only child, and Patricia had always been protective of him. "She just wants to help," David would say whenever I expressed concern about her boundary-crossing behavior. "She raised me by herself after my dad died when I was 12. She's finally getting the family she always dreamed of." The wedding, in fall 2021, was beautiful, but looking back, I should have paid more attention to the small signs. Patricia insisted on seating arrangements that separated me from my own family and friends. She gave a toast that focused more on David than on both of us. She even tried to convince me to change Emma's last name to Whitmore so we can all truly be one family. After we married, Patricia's behavior became more intense. She had keys to our house and would let herself in when we weren't home. I'd come back from work to find her rearranging my kitchen cabinets or going through Emma's school papers. She'd critique my parenting choices in front of Emma, undermining my authority with comments like, "Well, if you were my daughter, I'd handle this differently." Emma, who had always been cautious around new people, seemed uncomfortable around Patricia from the beginning. She'd hide behind my legs when Patricia tried to hug her or give her the elaborate gifts that showed up weekly. Patricia would buy Emma expensive toys and clothes, but always with strings attached. "Grandma Patricia bought you this beautiful dress, Emma. You need to wear it to church on Sunday and tell everyone how much you love your new grandma," she'd say, her voice saccharine sweet, but with an edge that made me uneasy. David couldn't see what I was seeing. When I tried to explain that his mother was being controlling, he'd get defensive. "She's just trying to bond with Emma. You're being too sensitive, Sarah. Mom has never had a grandchild before." The first real warning sign came during Emma's 6th birthday party in March 2023. I'd specifically told Patricia that Emma was allergic to tree nuts, a severe allergy that we'd discovered when she was 3 and had eaten a piece of almond cake at a friend's party. The reaction had been terrifying, requiring an immediate trip to the emergency room and an EpiPen prescription that I now carried everywhere. Patricia nodded when I explained Emma's allergy, taking notes in her little notebook like she always did when discussing Emma's needs. "Tree nuts. Got it. Poor little angel. We'll have to be so careful." But at the birthday party, Patricia showed up with a homemade cake that she insisted on serving instead of the nut-free cake I'd ordered from the bakery. I wanted to make something special for my granddaughter, she announced to all the guests. This is my mother's recipe, Emma's great-grandmother's cake. The cake looked beautiful, covered in pink frosting with delicate decorative work, but when I asked Patricia about the ingredients, she became evasive. Oh, it's just a basic vanilla cake, dear, nothing fancy. Something felt wrong. I'd learned to trust my instincts when it came to Emma's safety, so I quietly told Emma she couldn't have the cake until I checked with Patricia privately. When the other children were playing, I cornered Patricia in the kitchen. Patricia, I need to know exactly what's in that cake. Did you use any nuts or nut oils? Her expression changed from sweet grandmother to something colder. Sarah, you worry too much. It's just cake. Emma needs to try new things instead of being coddled all the time. That's not an answer. Did you use nuts? She sighed dramatically. There's might be a tiny bit of almond extract for flavoring. It's such a small amount, and it's artificial anyway. It won't hurt her. My blood ran cold. Almond extract, even artificial, could trigger Emma's allergy. I immediately threw the entire cake in the garbage while Patricia protested loudly about waste and overprotectiveness. The party guests were confused, but I didn't care. I wasn't taking any chances on my daughter's life. That night, after the guests left and Emma was in bed, David confronted me. You embarrassed my mother today, Sarah. She spent hours making that cake and you threw it away like garbage. Your mother put almond extract in a cake for a child who's allergic to tree nuts, David. She could have sent Emma to the hospital. It was artificial almond extract. That's not even made from nuts. I stared at my husband in disbelief. It doesn't matter if it's artificial or not. Any almond flavoring can trigger her allergy. The doctor was very clear about this. David shook his head. I think you're being paranoid, Sarah. Mom would never hurt Emma on purpose. But I wasn't paranoid. I was a mother protecting her child. That night, I called Emma's allergist and confirmed what I already knew. Any almond product, artificial or not, could cause a severe reaction. I also made a mental note to never let Patricia prepare food for Emma again. Over the following months, Patricia's behavior became increasingly strange. She'd ask detailed questions about Emma's allergy, claiming she wanted to learn how to keep Emma safe. She'd research articles about food allergies online and share them with me, always with comments about how interesting it was that such small amounts of allergens could cause such dramatic reactions. It's fascinating how the body responds, she'd say, her eyes bright with what I thought was concern, but now realized was something much darker. Such a tiny amount of the wrong thing can cause such chaos. She also started pushing boundaries in other ways. She'd try to take Emma places without asking permission first. She'd contradict my parenting decisions in front of Emma. She'd buy Emma gifts that I'd specifically said not to buy, then tell Emma that I was being mean when I took them away. The most disturbing incident happened in October 2023. I came home from work to find Patricia in Emma's room, going through her medical records and prescription information. She had Emma's EpiPen in her hands, examining it closely. Patricia, what are you doing? She startled, dropping the EpiPen. Oh, I was just curious about how these work. It's amazing that something so small can save a life. You went through Emma's private medical information. I'm her grandmother. I should know about her medical needs in case of an emergency. I took the EpiPen and Emma's medical files, locking them in my bedroom safe that night. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. Patricia seemed obsessed with Emma's allergy, but David kept insisting she was just being a caring grandmother. As Christmas 2023 approached, Patricia became more involved than ever in holiday planning. She insisted on hosting Christmas morning at her house, promising a magical celebration for Emma. She had decorated her entire house with elaborate Christmas displays and bought what seemed like hundreds of presents for Emma. This is going to be Emma's most
special Christmas ever," she kept saying. "I have such wonderful surprises planned." 2 weeks before Christmas, I found Patricia's notebook, the same one she'd been carrying for months, left open on my kitchen counter. The pages were filled with detailed notes about Emma's allergy, including research about reaction times, symptoms, and dosages. There were also notes about our daily schedule, Emma's school pickup times, and when David and I would be at work. The final entry, dated just 3 days earlier, made my stomach drop. Christmas morning, final plan. David will be in the garage getting bicycles. Sarah will be in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Emma is alone in the living room with presents. Window of opportunity, 15 to 20 minutes before reaction begins. Ambulance response time to my neighborhood, 12 minutes average. I read the entry 3 times, my hands shaking. This wasn't the notebook of a caring grandmother. This was the detailed planning of someone with sinister intentions. That night, I tried to talk to David about postponing Christmas at his mother's house, suggesting we celebrate at our own home instead. He was resistant, saying it would hurt his mother's feelings after all her preparation. "She's been planning this for months, Sarah. She's so excited about giving Emma the perfect Christmas morning." "What if we just came later in the day instead of first thing in the morning?" "Why are you being so difficult about this? It's Christmas, family time."
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I couldn't tell him about the notebook without it sounding like I was accusing his mother of planning to hurt Emma. I had no proof beyond my own suspicions and a notebook that could be interpreted as overly detailed research rather than malicious planning. But I knew I couldn't let Emma go to Patricia's house alone with her on Christmas morning. Whatever Patricia was planning, I was going to make sure it never happened. Christmas Eve night, I barely slept. I kept checking on Emma, making sure her EpiPen was in my purse, and running through emergency scenarios in my head. David thought I was being ridiculous, but something in my gut told me that tomorrow was going to change everything. Christmas morning arrived, gray and cold, with fresh snow covering Denver's streets. Emma woke up excited, bouncing on her bed at 6 in the morning with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. "Mommy, Santa came! Can we go see what he brought me?" I forced a smile, my stomach churning with anxiety. "We'll open our presents here first, then go to Grandma Patricia's house." David was already showering, humming Christmas carols like this was any normal holiday morning. He had no idea that I had hidden Emma's EpiPen in 3 different locations, one in my purse, one in the diaper bag, and one in my coat pocket. I'd also programmed 911 into a speed dial on my phone and researched the fastest route from Patricia's house to Denver General Hospital. We opened our family presents in our living room first. Emma squealed with delight over the art supplies and books we'd chosen for her, but I could barely focus on her joy. My mind kept returning to Patricia's notebook and those chilling words. Window of opportunity, 15 to 20 minutes before reaction begins. "Sarah, you're being weird," David said as I checked my purse for the 3rd time to make sure the EpiPen was there. "What's wrong with you today?" "I'm just tired. Didn't sleep well." By 9 o'clock, we were bundled up and heading to Patricia's house in the foothills. The drive normally took 20 minutes, but with the snow, it would be longer. I found myself memorizing every turn, every landmark, calculating how quickly an ambulance could navigate these winding mountain roads. Patricia's house looked like something from a Christmas movie. She'd strung thousands of lights across a Victorian-style home, and wreaths adorned every window. A massive Christmas tree was visible through the front window, surrounded by what appeared to be dozens of wrapped packages. "Wow, Grandma Patricia really went all out this year," David said, pulling into the driveway. Patricia met us at the door wearing a red velvet dress and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Merry Christmas! My darling family is finally here." She swept Emma into a hug that lasted too long. Emma stood stiff in her arms, looking at me over Patricia's shoulder with an expression that seemed to say, "Help me." "I've prepared such a special morning for you, Emma. Grandma has been working on surprises for weeks." The house smelled like cinnamon and pine,
But underneath those holiday scents was something else, something that made my nose tingle. I couldn't identify it, but it reminded me of the bakery where we'd bought Emma's allergy-safe birthday cake. Patricia's living room was a winter wonderland. The tree towered nearly to the ceiling, decorated with golden ornaments and twinkling lights. Presents were stacked so high around its base that they nearly obscured the tree stand. A child-sized table near the window held an elaborate tea set with what looked like homemade cookies and pastries. "Emma, sweetie, why don't you start opening your presents?" Patricia guided Emma toward the massive pile of gifts. "Grandma has made so many special things for you." David headed toward the kitchen. "Mom, what can I help with for breakfast?" "Oh, everything's already prepared, dear. But could you bring in the new bicycle from the garage? I want Emma to see it after she opens her other gifts." My heart rate spiked. This was exactly what Patricia had written in her notebook. David in the garage, me expected to be in the kitchen, Emma alone with her in the living room. "Actually, I'll help you with the bicycle, David," I said quickly. "Emma, why don't you wait for us before opening presents?" Patricia's expression flickered with annoyance. "Nonsense, Sarah. You should help me in the kitchen. Emma can start with just 1 or 2 presents." "I'd prefer to watch her open gifts. That's the fun of Christmas morning." "Of course," Patricia said, her smile becoming more forced. "Whatever you think is best." For the next hour, we maintained an awkward balance. Every time Patricia tried to get me away from Emma, I found an excuse to stay close. When Patricia suggested Emma try the special Christmas cookies on the tea table, I quickly redirected Emma to the crackers I'd brought from home. When Patricia offered Emma hot chocolate, I insisted Emma wasn't thirsty yet. Emma opened present after present. Expensive dolls, designer clothes, elaborate craft sets. Patricia had spent what must have been thousands of dollars, but each gift came with pointed comments. "This dress is for special occasions, Emma, when you want to look pretty for Grandma. These art supplies are professional grade, much better than those cheap ones that your mother buys. This doll has real human hair. She's very delicate, so you'll need to ask Grandma for help taking care of her." David was oblivious to the tension, delighting in his mother's generosity and Emma's polite thank yous. But I could see Emma becoming more uncomfortable with each gift. She kept looking at me for reassurance, sensing something was off, even if she couldn't articulate what. Around 11 o'clock, Patricia announced it was time for her special Christmas surprise. "Emma, honey, Grandma has made something very special just for you. It's a tradition from when Daddy was little." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying a crystal plate with what appeared to be homemade fudge cut into perfect squares. The pieces were decorated with red and green sprinkles and looked absolutely beautiful. "This is my grandmother's recipe," Patricia said, her eyes bright with excitement. "4 generations of Whitmore women have made this fudge for Christmas morning. Now Emma gets to carry on the tradition." Emma looked at the fudge with interest, but something about Patricia's intense enthusiasm made me step closer. "What kind of fudge is it?" I asked casually. "Traditional chocolate fudge, nothing fancy, just butter, sugar, chocolate, and a few special ingredients that make it extra delicious." The same evasive answer she'd given about the birthday cake. My maternal instincts went into high alert. What special ingredients? Patricia's smile became strained. "Oh, just vanilla and a touch of almond extract for depth of flavor. It's what makes our family recipe unique." Almond extract, just like the birthday cake. "Emma won't be having any fudge this morning," I said firmly. Patricia's mask slipped completely. "What do you mean she won't be having any? I made this specifically for her. It's a family tradition." "Emma doesn't eat anything with almond flavoring. You know this." "It's artificial almond extract, Sarah. You're being ridiculous." David looked confused. "What's the big deal? It's just fudge." "The big deal is that your mother continues to put almond flavoring in food for a child who's allergic to it, even after I've explained multiple times that artificial doesn't matter." "I researched it extensively," Patricia said, her voice shrill. Artificial almond extract is completely safe for children with tree nut allergies. It doesn't even contain nuts. You researched it extensively. I pulled out my phone and showed David the photos I'd taken of Patricia's notebook. Like you researched reaction times and ambulance response times? David stared at the images, his face pale. Mom, what is this? Patricia snatched my phone. That's private. You went through my personal belongings. You left it open on my kitchen counter. And these aren't the notes of someone researching how to keep Emma safe. These are the notes of someone planning to hurt her. You're being paranoid and dramatic, Patricia snapped. I would never hurt Emma. I love her. Then why do you keep trying to feed her things with almond flavoring? Why do you have detailed notes about how long allergic reactions take? Why did you plan to get David and me out of the room this morning? Emma had started crying, overwhelmed by the adult conflict swirling around her. I picked her up, holding her close while she buried her face in my shoulder. David was staring at his mother with dawning horror. Mom, tell me Sarah is wrong. Tell me you weren't planning to hurt Emma. Patricia's composure cracked completely. She's ruining our family. Before she came along, it was just you and me. Now she keeps Emma away from me, fills your head with lies about me, turns you against your own mother. So you decided to poison my daughter. I wasn't going to poison her. I just thought that if she had a little reaction, maybe you'd realize how fragile she is. Maybe you'd need me more. Maybe you'd let me help take care of her. The room went silent except for Emma's quiet sobs. David sat down hard on Patricia's couch, his head in his hands. A little reaction? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Do you understand what happens during an allergic reaction? Emma's throat could have closed. She could have stopped breathing. She could have died. I had it all planned out, Patricia said, her voice eerily calm now that her secret was exposed. I would have called 911 immediately. I had the EpiPen ready. She would have been fine, just scared. And then you would have seen that you need me, that Emma needs her grandmother. I felt sick. You were going to deliberately trigger a life-threatening allergic reaction in a 6-year-old because you wanted attention? I wanted my family back, Patricia screamed. You took my son away from me. You poisoned him against me. Emma should love me, but you've made her afraid of me. David looked up at his mother with tears in his eyes. Mom, Emma's not afraid of you because of anything Sarah did. She's afraid of you because you've been planning to hurt her. I would never hurt her. I love her more than anyone. Love doesn't try to cause allergic reactions, Mom. Love doesn't research how to harm a child and call it helping. I was already gathering Emma's things, desperate to get her out of this house and away from Patricia's reach. We're leaving, I announced. Now. Patricia blocked the doorway. You can't take her away from me. She's my granddaughter. I have rights. You have no rights to a child you plan to poison, David said, standing up with a strength I hadn't seen from him in months. Move away from the door, Mom. David, you can't choose her over your own mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And I'm grateful for that. But I won't sacrifice my daughter for your need to control our family. Patricia's face contorted with rage. Fine. Take the ungrateful little Brett, but don't come crawling back to me when your precious wife realizes what kind of man you really are. We left Patricia standing in her doorway, surrounded by expensive presents and homemade fudge that could have killed my daughter. The drive home was silent, except for Emma's occasional sniffles and David's quiet apologies. But our nightmare was far from over. Within 24 hours, Patricia's version of Christmas morning was spreading through David's extended family. According to her story, I was an unstable, paranoid woman who had falsely accused her of trying to harm Emma. She claimed I'd destroyed a beautiful family Christmas with my delusions and jealousy. Some relatives believed her. Others weren't sure what to think. but several family members who knew Patricia well privately reached out to David with their own disturbing stories about her behavior over the years. David's Aunt Rebecca called that evening. "I should have said something before, but your mother has always been intense about control. When you were little, she used to tell people that other family members were trying to hurt you so she could keep you isolated. I thought she'd grown out of it." David's cousin Michael shared his own experience. "She convinced my parents I was using drugs when I was 16 because she wanted them to send me to live with her for supervision. I wasn't using drugs, but she showed them fake evidence she'd planted in my room." As the stories emerged, a pattern became clear. Patricia had a long history of creating crises to make herself appear necessary and caring. David had been her primary target for decades, but now she'd transferred that obsessive need for control to Emma. 3 days after Christmas, Patricia showed up at our house unannounced, carrying a plate of cookies and acting as if nothing had happened. "I thought we could talk like rational adults," she said when I opened the door. "Clear up this silly misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Patricia. You planned to deliberately cause an allergic reaction in my daughter." "I think you misinterpreted my notes. I was researching allergies to better understand Emma's condition. Get off my property before I call the police." She left the cookies on our doorstep with a note that read, "For Emma, when her mother stops being unreasonable." I threw the cookies directly into the garbage without opening the container. I wasn't taking any chances. The cookies Patricia left on our doorstep became the first piece of evidence in what would soon become a criminal investigation. Against my better judgment, I decided to have them tested at a private laboratory in downtown Denver. The results came back 3 days later, and they confirmed my worst fears. Each cookie contained enough almond extract to trigger a severe allergic reaction in someone with Emma's sensitivity level. The lab technician who called with the results was clearly disturbed by what they'd found. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I've never seen anything like this. The concentration of almond extract in these cookies is approximately 15 times what any normal recipe would call for. There's no culinary reason to use this much flavoring. It would actually make the cookies taste terrible." I sat in my kitchen, staring at the lab report, feeling nauseous. Patricia had continued trying to poison Emma even after being confronted about her Christmas morning plot. This wasn't just a moment of poor judgment or misguided attention-seeking. This was systematic, ongoing, attempted harm. David found me at the kitchen table that evening, the lab results spread out in front of me along with printed copies of Patricia's notebook pages. "We have to go to the police," I said without looking up. "This isn't going to stop." David sank into the chair across from me, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. "I keep thinking there has to be some explanation. Somehow, this isn't as bad as it looks. Your mother researched how long it takes for allergic reactions to begin, calculated ambulance response times, and then spent weeks planning the perfect opportunity to poison our daughter. Then, when that failed, she made cookies with enough almond extract to kill Emma and left them on our doorstep. What other explanation could there be? Maybe she's having some kind of mental health crisis. Maybe she needs help, not criminal charges." I understood David's struggle. Patricia was the only parent he'd ever really known after his father died. But I was Emma's mother, and my priority was protecting her. Even if Patricia is having a mental health crisis, that doesn't make Emma any less dead if she eats those cookies. We can't fix your mother at the expense of our daughter's safety. The next morning, we went to the Denver Police Department. Detective Maria Santos, a woman in her 40s with kind but sharp eyes, listened to our story without interruption. When we finished, she studied the evidence we'd brought: Patricia's notebook, the lab report on the cookies, photos of the Christmas morning fudge, and detailed documentation of every incident over the year. "This is one of the most premeditated cases I've seen involving a child," Detective Santos said finally. "Your mother-in-law didn't just plan to harm Emma once. She's been building up to this for months, testing boundaries and gathering information." "What happens now?" David asked. "We'll start with questioning Mrs. Whittemore and searching her residence. Based on what you've shown me, we have probable cause for both. We'll also need detailed statements from both of you about every interaction you can remember with her regarding Emma's allergy." The formal interview process took most of the day. Detective Santos walked us through every incident chronologically, asking for specific details about conversations, Patricia's behavior, and any witnesses who might corroborate our accounts. When we got to the birthday party incident, Detective Santos stopped taking notes and looked up at me. You said she became evasive when you asked about ingredients, then admitted there was almond extract but downplayed the danger. Yes, she said it was artificial, so it wouldn't hurt Emma, but she said it in a way that made it clear she knew I would object if she told me up front. And when you threw the cake away, what was her reaction?
She was angry. Not just disappointed. Angry. She accused me of being overprotective and wasteful. Detective Santos made a note. Someone who genuinely made an innocent mistake would have been apologetic and concerned, not angry at the parent for protecting their child. The interview continued for hours, covering every detail from Patricia's excessive boundary crossing to her research notes about allergic reactions. By the time we finished, I felt emotionally drained but relieved that someone in authority was finally taking our concerns seriously. We'll execute the search warrant tomorrow morning, Detective Santos told us. In the meantime, I need you both to have no contact with Mrs. Whitmore. Don't answer if she calls, don't respond to texts or emails, and call us immediately if she shows up at your house or Emma's school. That evening, David called Patricia to tell her she was under investigation and that she needed to stay away from our family. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, but we could hear Patricia screaming through the phone from across the room. "You're destroying our family over that woman's paranoid delusions. Emma is my granddaughter. I have every right to see her." "Mom, you need to get a lawyer. The police are going to want to talk to you." The line went dead. An hour later, Patricia's sister Helen called David. "David, honey, your mother is beside herself. She says Sarah has convinced the police that she tried to poison Emma. That's just ridiculous." "Aunt Helen, did Mom tell you about the notebook? About the detailed plans she made?" "She said she was researching Emma's condition to be helpful. That's just Patricia being thorough. You know how she is." "Being thorough doesn't include calculating ambulance response times and planning when Emma would be alone." There was a long pause. "What do you mean, planning when Emma would be alone?" David explained about the Christmas morning timeline Patricia had mapped out. When he finished, Helen was quiet for so long that David thought the call had dropped. "Helen, are you there?" "David, I need to tell you something. Something I probably should have mentioned years ago." Helen's story sent chills down my spine. When David was 8 years old, he'd been hospitalized with severe food poisoning after eating at Patricia's house. The doctors couldn't identify what had caused it, but David had been violently ill for days. Patricia had been the perfect concerned mother, staying by his bedside, bringing him special foods to help him recover. "She got so much attention from the nurses and doctors," Helen said. "Everyone kept praising her for being such a devoted mother. She seemed to enjoy it. The drama, the sympathy, being seen as the hero nursing you back to health." "Are you saying Mom made me sick on purpose?" "I don't know for sure, but there was something about the way she acted. She wasn't just worried, she was almost excited. And the foods she brought you were things that would be easy to contaminate if someone wanted to keep you sick longer." Helen also revealed that Patricia had spread rumors about other family members being dangerous around children, always positioning herself as the only safe caretaker. She told everyone that your cousin Jake's father was drinking too much and shouldn't be around children. She said your Aunt Margaret's boyfriend was inappropriate with kids. None of it was true, but she'd present just enough twisted facts to make people worried. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Patricia had spent decades manipulating situations to make herself appear necessary and heroic, often at the expense of other people's well-being and reputations. The search of Patricia's house the next day yielded disturbing evidence. Detective Santos called us that afternoon with an update. "We found a significant amount of almond extract in her kitchen, far more than any normal household would have.
We also found detailed internet search histories about allergic reactions, emergency response times, and symptoms of nut allergies in children. They'd also discovered Patricia's computer, which contained months of searches about Emma specifically. She'd researched Emma's school schedule, looked up information about my work hours, and even found articles about custody rights for grandparents. Most concerning, Detective Santos continued, we found a journal hidden in her bedroom. It contains detailed fantasies about Emma having a medical emergency and Mrs. Whitmore saving her life. She wrote about how grateful your family would be, how Emma would finally bond with her, and how she would become the hero of the situation. The journal entries went back almost 2 years, starting shortly after Emma began showing wariness around Patricia. They revealed a disturbing escalation from wanting to be needed to planning actual emergencies to create that need. One entry, dated 6 months earlier, was particularly chilling. Emma will never love me the way she should as long as Sarah keeps poisoning her against me. But if something happened to Emma, something scary but not truly dangerous, she would see that Grandma is the one who keeps her safe. David would remember that I'm the one who's always been there for him. Detective Santos explained that Patricia had been arrested and charged with attempted poisoning, child endangerment, and stalking. The district attorney's office was considering additional charges related to the premeditated nature of her actions. The evidence is overwhelming, Detective Santos assured us. The notebook, the internet search histories, the excessive amounts of almond extract, and the journal entries create a clear picture of criminal intent. But Patricia wasn't going down without a fight. Within days of her arrest, she'd hired an expensive defense attorney who began mounting a campaign to discredit our family.
Patricia's lawyer, Richard Kellerman, held a press conference claiming that Patricia was the victim of a vindictive daughter-in-law who had manipulated evidence and coached a child to lie about her grandmother. Mrs. Whitmore is a retired educator with an impeccable reputation who has been targeted by false accusations, Kellerman announced to local news cameras. She was simply researching her granddaughter's medical condition to better understand how to keep her safe. The press conference made the evening news, and suddenly our private nightmare became public. Patricia's version of events, that she was an innocent grandmother being persecuted by an unstable daughter-in-law, began circulating on social media. Some people believed her story. Comments on news articles questioned why a grandmother would want to hurt her own granddaughter. They suggested I was jealous of Patricia's relationship with Emma or was trying to keep Emma away from David's family for selfish reasons. The public scrutiny was overwhelming. Reporters called our house and photographers showed up at Emma's school. I had to take time off work because journalists were contacting my employer asking for comments about the alleged poisoning plot. Emma, thankfully, was too young to fully understand what was happening, but she knew something was very wrong. She'd started having nightmares and asking why people were taking pictures of our house. "Are we in trouble, Mummy?" she asked one evening after a particularly aggressive reporter had tried to interview her at the playground. "No, sweetheart. Some people are confused about what happened, but we're not in trouble. The police know we're telling the truth." David was struggling with his own guilt and confusion. Half his extended family believed Patricia's claims of innocence, while the other half was sharing their own stories of her manipulative behavior over the years. "I feel like my entire childhood was a lie," he told me one night. "How many times did she create problems just so she could swoop in and fix them? How many people did she hurt with her lies about them being dangerous or inappropriate?" The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after Patricia's arrest. During that time, more evidence continued to emerge. Patricia's internet search history revealed that she'd been researching not just Emma's allergy, but also methods for triggering allergic reactions and hiding evidence of food tampering. She'd also been contacting Emma's school under false pretenses, calling to ask about pickup procedures and whether grandparents were allowed to take children without parental permission. Most damning of all, the police found a practice journal where Patricia had written detailed scripts for how she would respond when Emma had her planned allergic reaction. "Oh my goodness, Emma, what's wrong?" "Don't worry, sweetie. Grandma knows exactly what to do. Mommy and Daddy aren't here, but Grandma will take care of
everything. You're going to be fine, and you'll see that Grandma's always here to protect you. She'd even practice her call to 911, writing out the exact words she would use to sound like a panicked but competent grandmother dealing with an unexpected emergency. Reading those practice scripts made me physically ill. Patricia hadn't just planned to poison Emma, she'd rehearsed her performance as the heroic rescuer who would save Emma's life after deliberately endangering it. The weeks leading up to Patricia's preliminary hearing brought unexpected revelations that painted an even darker picture of her decades-long pattern of manipulation. Detective Santos called us on a Tuesday, morning in early February, with news that would change everything we thought we knew about David's childhood. "We've been contacted by 3 more families with stories about Patricia," she said. "All of them involve incidents with children and mysterious illnesses or accidents that Patricia seemed unusually prepared to handle." The first call had come from David's former neighbor, Margaret Chen, who lived next door to Patricia from 1995 to 2003. Margaret's daughter, Lisa, had been David's closest friend during elementary school, often playing at Patricia's house after school. Lisa started getting sick every time she ate at Patricia's house. It was always stomach problems, nausea, vomiting, sometimes severe enough that I had to pick her up early. Patricia would call me so concerned and helpful, offering to bring Lisa special foods to settle her stomach. Margaret had eventually stopped allowing Lisa to eat at Patricia's house, attributing the illnesses to food sensitivity or stress. But looking back with adult perspective, she realized the pattern had been too consistent to be coincidental. "Patricia always had the perfect remedy ready," Margaret continued. "She'd have special crackers, specific teas, medications that she claimed her doctor had recommended. It was like she knew exactly what would happen and had prepared for it." The second caller was even more disturbing. Janet Morrison had been Patricia's coworker at the elementary school where Patricia had worked as a principal. Janet reported that Patricia had an unusual interest in students with medical conditions, particularly allergies and chronic illnesses. She kept detailed files on every child's medical information, far beyond what was necessary for emergency purposes. She'd researched their conditions extensively and often suggest changes to their care plans that their own doctors hadn't recommended. Janet also revealed that Patricia had been investigated by the school district after several incidents where children with known allergies had unexpected reactions during school events that Patricia had organized. The investigation was quietly dropped because no direct evidence was found, but there were too many coincidences. Children would have reactions at events where Patricia was in charge of food, but never at other school functions. The third revelation came from Patricia's own sister, Helen, who had initially defended her but was now having serious doubts. Helen called Detective Santos after spending weeks thinking about her conversation with David. "I need to tell you about something that happened when David was 12, something I've never told anyone because Patricia made me promise to keep it secret." Helen's story was horrifying. During a family camping trip, David had suffered what appeared to be a severe allergic reaction to something he'd eaten. He'd never shown any food allergies before, but he suddenly developed difficulty breathing, facial swelling, and required emergency medical treatment.
Patricia was incredible that night, Helen remembered. She seemed to know exactly what to do. She had Benadryl in her bag, she knew how to position David to help him breathe, and she stayed calm while the rest of us panicked. The doctors at the emergency room had been puzzled because they couldn't identify what had triggered David's reaction. They'd tested him for common allergens, but nothing came back positive. Patricia told the doctors that David had eaten some trail mix that might have contained nuts, but I remembered her packing all the food for the trip herself. She said she'd thrown away the remainder of the trail mix because she felt so guilty about not checking the ingredients carefully. Helen thought Patricia was being responsible by disposing of the potentially dangerous food. But now, decades later, she was wondering if Patricia had caused David's reaction deliberately. She got so much attention that night,
And for weeks afterward, people kept talking about what an amazing mother she was, how she'd saved David's life with her quick thinking. She seemed to glow from all the praise. Detective Santos shared these new revelations with the district attorney's office, which decided to expand the investigation. They brought in a forensic psychiatrist, Dr. James Reeves, to evaluate Patricia's psychological profile and assess whether her behavior fit known patterns of criminal conduct. Dr. Reeves spent hours reviewing all the evidence: Patricia's journals, her internet searches, testimonies from family members and former neighbors, and her documented interactions with Emma. His preliminary assessment was chilling. Mrs. Whitmore appears to exhibit characteristics consistent with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a form of abuse where a caregiver deliberately causes or fabricates illness in someone under their care to gain attention and sympathy, Dr. Reeves explained to us during a meeting at the prosecutor's office. The pattern we see here, the extensive research into medical conditions, the preparation for emergency situations, the positioning herself as the heroic rescuer, and most critically, the deliberate inducement of medical crises, all align with this diagnosis. Dr. Reeves explained that people with this condition often target children because they're vulnerable and unable to advocate for themselves effectively. They're drawn to the drama and attention that medical emergencies create, and they become addicted to being seen as devoted caregivers. What makes Mrs. Whitmore's case particularly dangerous is the level of premeditation and planning involved. Most cases of Munchausen by proxy involve impulse decisions or gradual escalation. Mrs. Whitmore spent months carefully researching and planning her attack on Emma. The prosecutor, District Attorney Sarah Kim, outlined the charges Patricia would face at trial. The original charges of attempted poisoning and child endangerment had been upgraded to attempted murder in the first degree due to the premeditated nature of her actions. The evidence shows clear intent to cause severe bodily harm that could have resulted in death, DA Kim explained. The amount of almond extract found in those cookies, combined with her detailed knowledge of Emma's allergy severity, demonstrates that she understood the potentially fatal consequences of her actions. Patricia's defense attorney, meanwhile, was preparing a very different narrative. Richard Kellerman had hired his own psychiatrist, who was expected to testify that Patricia suffered from severe depression and anxiety following her son's marriage, leading to poor judgment but not criminal intent. They're going to argue that she was trying to help Emma by exposing her to small amounts of allergens to build immunity. It's medically nonsensical, but it might create reasonable doubt with some jurors. The media intensified as the trial date approached. Patricia's case had captured national interest, with news outlets framing it as a story about grandparents' rights versus parental protection. Some commentators suggested that the charges were excessive, arguing that Patricia's actions were misguided rather than criminal. David found himself at the center of unwanted attention. As reporters dug into his background and childhood, several news outlets requested interviews about growing up with Patricia, wanting to know if he'd seen signs of her alleged abusive behavior. I keep replaying every memory from my childhood. Was I really sick all those times, or did she make me sick? Were the other families really dangerous, or did she lie about them to keep me isolated? The psychological impact on David was severe. He'd started seeing a therapist to process the possibility that his entire understanding of his childhood was built on lies and manipulation. Emma, meanwhile, was struggling with her own confusion about the situation. She knew that Grandma Patricia was in trouble with the police, but she couldn't understand why adults were always asking her questions about Christmas morning and whether Grandma had ever tried to give her special food. "I don't want to talk about Grandma Patricia anymore," Emma told me after a particularly intense interview with a child psychologist who was evaluating her testimony for the trial. "Can we just pretend she never happened?" The preliminary hearing finally took place on a cold February morning. Patricia appeared in court wearing a conservative navy dress, her hair styled perfectly, looking every inch the respectable retired educator she claimed to be.
She'd lost weight during her weeks in custody, which her attorney used to emphasize her suffering and mental state. Judge Patricia Valdez, coincidentally sharing Patricia's first name, presided over the hearing. She reviewed all the evidence methodically: the notebook, the lab reports, the internet search history, the journal entries, and the testimonies from multiple witnesses. Patricia's attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial and could be interpreted as the actions of an overly anxious grandmother trying to understand her granddaughter's medical condition. My client researched allergic reactions because she wanted to be prepared to help in case of emergency. She kept detailed notes because she's a former educator who approaches everything methodically. Her concern was genuine, not criminal.
The prosecutor countered by presenting Patricia's practice scripts for her 911 call and her detailed timeline for Christmas morning. This wasn't anxious preparation, DA Kim argued. This was careful planning for a deliberate attack on a child. The defendant didn't just research allergic reactions. She researched how to cause them, how long they take to develop, and how to position herself as the hero who would save the victim from the crisis she created. Judge Valdez took only 20 minutes to review the evidence before ruling that there was probable cause for the charges to proceed to trial. The evidence presented suggests a systematic plan to endanger a child's life, Judge Valdez stated. While the defendant's mental state and intentions will be matters for the jury to determine, the evidence certainly supports the charges as filed. Patricia's bail was set at $500,000 with strict conditions, including no contact with Eva, no contact with our family, and surrender of her passport. Her attorney indicated they would appeal the bail amount, but Patricia's sister Helen quietly told David that the family wouldn't be posting bail. "We've all been talking," Helen said after the hearing. "The stories that have come out, we can't pretend this is just a misunderstanding anymore. Patricia needs help, but she also needs to face consequences for what she's done." That evening, as we finally returned home after the emotional day in court, Emma asked me a question that broke my heart. "Mommy, why did Grandma Patricia want to hurt me? I thought grandmas were supposed to love their granddaughters." I held her close, struggling to find age-appropriate words to explain something I couldn't fully understand myself. "Sometimes adults get confused and make very bad choices," I said finally. "Grandma Patricia was sick in her mind, and that sickness made her think hurting you would somehow help her feel better. But that's not your fault, and it doesn't mean anything about you." "Are there other grandmas who try to hurt kids?" "Most grandmas love their grandchildren very much and would never hurt them. Grandma Patricia was different because of her sickness. But you don't need to worry about that anymore because we're keeping you safe." As I tucked Emma into bed that night, I realized that no matter what happened at trial, our family had already been forever changed. The trust and innocence that should define childhood relationships with extended family had been shattered. But we had survived Patricia's plan, Emma was safe, and justice was finally moving forward. The preliminary hearing had validated what we'd known all along. Patricia's actions were criminal, not just misguided, and she would face the full consequences of her choices. The trial of Patricia Whitmore began on May 15th, 8 months after the Christmas morning that nearly cost Emma her life. The courthouse in downtown Denver was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and family members from both sides. As we walked through the media gauntlet that morning, I kept Emma close to me, shielding her face from the cameras and shouting questions. Judge Patricia Valdez had imposed strict rules about photography and recording inside the courtroom, but that didn't stop the circus atmosphere outside. Patricia's case had become a national story, with legal experts debating grandparents' rights, child protection laws, and the psychology of family abuse on television talk shows. The prosecution team, led by District Attorney Sarah Kim and her assistant prosecutor James Chen, had spent months building an ironclad case. They'd organized the evidence chronologically, starting with Patricia's earliest suspicious behaviors and building to the Christmas morning plot that finally exposed her true intentions. In her opening statement,
DA Kim painted a picture of a woman whose need for control and attention had evolved into a willingness to endanger a child's life. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the next 2 weeks, you will hear evidence of one of the most calculated and cold-blooded attempts to harm a child that I have encountered in my 20 years as a prosecutor, Kim began, her voice steady and commanding. The defendant, Patricia Whitmore, spent months researching how to trigger a potentially fatal allergic reaction in her 6-year-old step-granddaughter. She planned the timing, calculated emergency response times, and positioned herself as the hero who would save the child from the life-threatening crisis she created. Kim walked the jury through Patricia's notebook, her internet searches, and her detailed journal entries, emphasizing the premeditated nature of every action. This wasn't a moment of poor judgment or a misguided attempt to help. This was an attempted murder, carefully planned and methodically executed by a woman who valued her own psychological needs more than a child's life. Patricia's defense attorney, Richard Kellerman, presented a starkly different narrative in his opening statement. He portrayed Patricia as a loving grandmother who had been misunderstood and wrongly accused by a paranoid daughter-in-law. My client, Patricia Whitmore, dedicated her life to caring for children. She spent 30 years as an educator, helping thousands of students. When her son married and brought a granddaughter into her life, she was overjoyed. She researched Emma's medical condition not to harm her, but to better understand how to keep her safe. Kellerman suggested that Patricia's detailed notes were evidence of her thorough educational background rather than criminal planning. He claimed that the almond extract in the Christmas fudge and cookies was the result of forgetfulness, not malicious intent. Mrs. Whitmore suffers from severe anxiety and depression, conditions that have worsened since her son's marriage changed their family dynamics. Her actions, while perhaps excessive, were born of love and concern, not criminal intent. The prosecution's case began with Dr. Amanda Foster, Emma's allergist, who testified about the severity of Emma's tree nut allergy and the potentially fatal consequences of exposure to almond extract. Even artificial almond extract can trigger anaphylaxis in someone with Emma's sensitivity level, Dr. Foster explained to the jury. The amount of almond extract found in the defendant's cookies was approximately 15 times what would be used in normal baking. A child with Emma's allergy could have gone into anaphylactic shock within minutes of consumption. Dr. Foster's testimony was crucial in establishing that Patricia's actions weren't just reckless. They were potentially lethal.
Detective Maria Santos took the stand next, walking the jury through the evidence found during the investigation. She displayed Patricia's notebook with its chilling timeline and calculations, and read excerpts from Patricia's journal that revealed her fantasies about Emma having a medical emergency. The defendant wrote extensively about scenarios where Emma would need emergency medical care and how grateful the family would be when she provided that care, Detective Santos testified. These weren't casual thoughts. They were detailed plans spanning multiple pages and months of entries. The forensic computer analyst Thomas Rodriguez presented Patricia's internet search history to the jury. The searches painted a disturbing picture of someone researching not just allergic reactions, but specifically how to trigger them. The defendant searched for terms like how much almond extract causes allergic reaction, symptoms of anaphylaxis in children, how long before allergic reaction starts, and emergency response times Denver suburbs, Rodriguez testified. These searches occurred over a 6-month period leading up to Christmas, with the frequency increasing significantly in December. When the prosecution called me to testify, I felt the weight of the entire courtroom's attention. DA Kim walked me through our relationship with Patricia, from our first meeting through the escalating incidents that culminated in Christmas morning. I testified about Patricia's boundary violations, her obsession with Emma's allergy, and the birthday party incident where she'd tried to serve Emma cake with almond extract. When I asked Mrs. Whitmore specifically about the ingredients in the birthday cake, she became evasive. She said there was just a tiny bit of almond extract and that it was artificial so it wouldn't hurt Emma. But she said it in a way that made it clear she knew I would object if she told me up front.
During cross-examination, Kellerman tried to portray me as an overprotective mother who had misinterpreted Patricia's well-meaning but clumsy attempts to bond with Emma. Isn't it true, Mrs. Rodriguez, that you immediately threw away the birthday cake without even attempting to determine if it was actually dangerous? I threw it away because any almond product, artificial or not, can trigger Emma's allergy. I wasn't going to risk my daughter's life to spare someone's feelings. But you never gave Mrs. Whitmore a chance to explain or learn from her mistake? She had already explained that she put almond extract in food for a child with a tree nut allergy. There was nothing more to learn from that. Kellerman's attempts to paint me as unreasonable fell flat with the jury, especially when D.A. Kim presented evidence of Patricia's continued attempts to expose Emma to allergens even after being repeatedly warned about the danger. David's testimony was perhaps the most emotionally difficult part of the trial. He had to reconcile the love for the woman who raised him with the evidence of her criminal actions. My mother was always very controlling. I thought it was because she loved me and wanted to protect me. But looking back now, I wonder how many of my childhood illnesses were actually caused by her need for attention and control. David described Patricia's isolation tactics, her lies about other family members being dangerous, and her manipulation of medical situations to position herself as the indispensable caregiver. She would create problems so she could solve them. I thought she was just naturally good in emergencies, but now I realize she might have been causing some of those emergencies. The defense's case rested heavily on the testimony of Dr. William Hayes, a psychiatrist who had evaluated Patricia and diagnosed her with severe depression and anxiety disorders. Mrs. Whitmore was suffering from empty nest syndrome, exacerbated by her son's marriage. Her actions, while inappropriate, were driven by mental illness rather than criminal intent. She genuinely believed she was trying to help her granddaughter by gradually exposing her to small amounts of allergens to build immunity. During cross-examination, D.A. Kim dismantled Dr. Hayes' testimony by presenting evidence that Patricia had researched the medical literature and would have known that gradual exposure therapy for food allergies requires medical supervision and cannot be done with artificial almond extract. Dr. Hayes, are you familiar with the current medical protocols for allergen desensitization therapy? Generally, yes. Is it ever appropriate for a layperson to attempt allergen exposure therapy without medical supervision? No, absolutely not. Is artificial almond extract ever used in legitimate allergen therapy for tree nut allergies? No, it would not be. So, the defendant's claim that she was trying to help Emma build immunity through exposure is medically impossible? Based on the methods she used, yes, that claim is not medically sound. The prosecution's final witness was Dr. James Reeves, the forensic psychiatrist who had evaluated Patricia. His testimony about Munchausen syndrome by proxy was devastating to the defense. The defendant exhibits clear patterns consistent with this disorder. The extensive research into medical conditions, the positioning herself as the heroic rescuer, the detailed planning of medical emergencies, and, most critically, the deliberate inducement of those emergencies all align with this diagnosis. Dr. Reeves explained that people with this condition often appear to be devoted caregivers while actually causing the medical crises they claim to be preventing.
What makes this case particularly dangerous is the level of sophistication in the defendant's planning. She understood exactly how severe Emma's allergic reactions could be, and she planned to trigger one anyway because she valued the attention and control more than the child's safety. Patricia herself chose not to testify on the advice of her attorney. This decision likely saved her from devastating cross-examination, but it also meant the jury never heard her explain her actions in her own words. In closing arguments, D.A. Kim summarized the overwhelming evidence against Patricia with cold precision. The defendant spent months planning to poison a 6-year-old child. She researched the most effective methods, calculated the timing, and prepared her performance as the rescuer. When her Christmas morning plan failed, she continued trying to poison Emma with contaminated cookies. This wasn't love.
This was attempted murder. Kellerman's closing argument focused on Patricia's mental state and her lack of criminal history. My client is a sick woman who made terrible decisions while suffering from severe mental illness. She never intended to seriously harm Emma. She thought she was helping. This is a case for treatment, not imprisonment. The jury deliberated for 6 hours over 2 days before reaching their verdict. When Judge Valdez called the court back into session, the courtroom was completely silent as the jury foreman stood to read the verdict. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of stalking, we find the defendant guilty. Patricia showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but her sister Helen began crying quietly in the gallery. David squeezed my hand as relief washed over both of us. Judge Valdez scheduled sentencing for the following month, warning that the conviction for attempted murder carried a potential sentence of 16 to 40 years in prison. As we left the courthouse that day, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't experienced since Christmas morning. Justice had been served, and Emma was finally safe from Patricia's manipulation forever. The woman who had planned to poison my daughter was going to prison, and the legal system had validated what we'd known all along. Patricia's actions were criminal, not just misguided. Emma, who had been staying with my parents during the trial, would finally be able to move forward without the shadow of Patricia's threats hanging over her childhood. But even in victory, I knew that the psychological scars from this experience would take years to heal for all of us. 3 weeks after Patricia's conviction, we returned to Judge Valdez's courtroom for the sentencing hearing. The media attention had somewhat diminished, but the gallery was still filled with reporters, family members, and advocates for child protection who had followed the case from the beginning. Patricia appeared thinner and more frail than during the trial. Her attorney had submitted numerous character references from former colleagues and students, attempting to paint a picture of a woman whose entire life had been dedicated to helping children, making her crimes all the more inexplicable. The sentencing hearing began with victim impact statements. I had spent days preparing what I wanted to say to Patricia, struggling to find words that could convey the depth of her betrayal and its lasting impact on our family. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Patricia Whitmore didn't just plan to poison my daughter. She systematically destroyed our family's sense of safety and trust. Emma, who should be learning that the world is full of people who care about her, instead learned that someone who claimed to love her was planning to hurt her. I talked about the months of therapy Emma had needed to process her fear and confusion, the way she now flinched when strangers offered her food, and the nightmares that still occasionally woke her up crying for me. Emma asked me last week if there were other grandmas who try to hurt children. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to worry about whether family members are safe. Patricia's actions didn't just endanger Emma's physical health. They damaged her ability to trust the adults who are supposed to protect her. David's statement focused on the psychological manipulation he'd endured throughout his life and his guilt over exposing Emma to Patricia's influence. I brought Patricia into Emma's life because I thought she was a loving grandmother. I defended her when Sarah raised concerns. I enabled her access to Emma because I couldn't see past my own childhood conditioning to recognize that my mother was dangerous.
David described the ongoing therapy he'd needed to process the possibility that many of his childhood illnesses and the isolation from other family members had been orchestrated by Patricia's need for control. I'm learning that love doesn't involve creating crises so you can solve them. Love doesn't involve hurting someone to make yourself feel needed. I failed to protect Emma from Patricia because I didn't understand what genuine maternal love looked like. Helen Whitmore, Patricia's sister, also chose to speak at the sentencing hearing. Her statement was perhaps the most powerful because it came from someone who had known Patricia for 65 years. My sister was always manipulative, but I told myself it was just her personality. I made excuses for her behavior because she was family. But I can't make excuses for planning to poison a child. Patricia needs to face the full consequences of her actions, and she needs to be where she can't hurt any more children. Helen revealed additional incidents from Patricia's past that she'd never reported. Suspicious accidents involving neighborhood children, mysterious illnesses at school events Patricia organized, and her disturbing fascination with medical emergencies involving kids. I should have spoken up years ago. I should have recognized that Patricia's helpfulness during medical crises was actually her creating those crises. Maybe if I had been braver, Emma wouldn't have been in danger. The prosecution asked for the maximum sentence, citing the premeditated nature of Patricia's crimes and the vulnerability of her intended victim.
This defendant spent months planning to trigger a potentially fatal allergic reaction in a 6-year-old child, DA Kim argued. She researched the most effective methods, calculated emergency response times, and prepared elaborate cover stories for her actions. This level of planning and the callous disregard for a child's life demands the most serious consequences our justice system allows. DA Kim also addressed Patricia's lack of remorse, noting that she had never apologized to the family or acknowledged the harm she intended to cause. The defendant has shown no recognition that her actions were wrong, no empathy for her victims, and no indication that she wouldn't repeat these behaviors if given the opportunity. She remains a danger to any child who might come under her influence. The defense argued for leniency based on Patricia's mental health issues and her previously clean record. My client suffers from severe mental illness that impaired her judgment, Kellerman pleaded. She dedicated her career to helping children and has no prior criminal history. With proper treatment and supervision, she can be rehabilitated. Kellerman presented letters from mental health professionals who argued that Patricia's actions were the result of untreated psychological disorders rather than inherent criminality. However, the prosecution countered with testimony from Dr. Reeves, who explained that Munchausen syndrome by proxy had a poor prognosis for rehabilitation and that Patricia's sophisticated planning indicated her mental illness didn't impair her understanding of right and wrong. The defendant knew her actions were illegal and potentially lethal, Dr. Reeves testified. Her elaborate planning to avoid detection demonstrated that she understood the wrongfulness of her conduct. Mental illness may explain her motivations, but it doesn't excuse her choices. Before pronouncing the sentence, Judge Valdez addressed Patricia directly, asking if she wanted to make a statement on her own behalf. Patricia stood slowly, her voice barely audible as she spoke for the first time since her arrest. "I loved Emma," Patricia said, her words lacking any emotion. "Everything I did was because I loved her. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Even in her final statement, Patricia couldn't acknowledge the intentional nature of her actions or take responsibility for the harm she had planned to cause. Judge Valdez's sentencing speech was thorough and devastating. "Mrs. Whitmore, in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered a case involving such calculated cruelty toward a child. You systematically planned to poison a 6-year-old girl not out of anger or passion, but out of a twisted need for attention and control.
The judge addressed Patricia's claim that she acted out of love. Love protects children from harm. It doesn't create that harm. Love seeks a child's well-being. It doesn't sacrifice that well-being for personal gratification. Your actions represented the antithesis of love. Judge Valdez sentenced Patricia to 28 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 18 years. She also imposed a lifetime restraining order preventing any contact with Emma or our family. This sentence reflects the severity of your crimes and the need to protect not just Emma, but all children who might come into contact with you in the future. Judge Valdez concluded. Patricia showed no reaction to the sentence, but I felt a tremendous weight lift from my shoulders. Emma would be 24 years old before Patricia would even be eligible for parole, and 34 before Patricia could potentially be released if parole were granted. As we left the courthouse for the final time, reporters asked how we felt about the sentence. David spoke for our family. Justice was served today. Patricia will spend the rest of her productive years in prison, which is appropriate for someone who planned to murder a child. Our focus now is on healing and moving forward. The months following Patricia's sentencing brought unexpected peace to our lives. Without the constant threat of her manipulation and interference, our family dynamic improved dramatically. David's therapy helped him process his childhood trauma and develop healthier boundaries with his remaining family members. Emma slowly began to heal from the psychological impact of Patricia's betrayal. With the help of a skilled child therapist, she learned to understand that Patricia's actions were about Patricia's sickness, not about Emma being unlovable or unsafe. Dr. Martinez says that some grown-ups have broken brains that make them do mean things, Emma explained to me one day after therapy. She says it's not my fault that Grandma Patricia's brain was broken. Emma's nightmares gradually became less frequent, and she started accepting food from trusted adults again without the paralyzing fear that had dominated her behavior for months after Christmas. 1 year after Patricia's sentencing, Emma started asking about getting a new grandmother, someone who would bake safe cookies and read bedtime stories without scary plans hidden underneath. Maybe we could adopt a grandmother who needs a granddaughter, Emma suggested with the hopeful optimism that was finally returning to her personality. David's relationship with his extended family slowly rebuilt as relatives who had initially believed Patricia's lies came to understand the truth about her decades of manipulation. Helen became a positive presence in Emma's life, serving as the kind and safe grandmother figure that Patricia had pretended to be. We moved to a new house across town, wanting a fresh start without the memories of Patricia's boundary violations and surprise visits. Emma helped choose her new bedroom colors and made friends with neighbor children whose parents were aware of her allergy and committed to keeping her safe. The trial had been covered by several national news outlets, leading to increased awareness about Munchausen syndrome by proxy and the warning signs that family members and medical professionals should watch for. I received letters from other families who had recognized similar patterns in their own relatives and sought help before tragedies occurred. Dr. Reeves published a case study of Patricia's crimes in a medical journal, helping to educate healthcare providers about the sophisticated planning that can be involved in these cases.
The article emphasized the importance of taking parents' concerns seriously when they report suspicious patterns in caregiver behavior. Emma's allergist, Dr. Foster, implemented new protocols in her practice for documenting and tracking families where extended family members showed unusual interest in triggering or managing allergic reactions. 2 years after the sentencing, I wrote a book about our experience, hoping to help other families recognize and respond to similar manipulation. The book, titled When Family Becomes the Enemy, Protecting Children from Those Who Claim to Love Them, became a resource for parents, educators, and healthcare professionals. Emma, now 8 years old and thriving in 3rd grade, occasionally asks questions about Patricia and why she did what she did. I answer her questions honestly, but age-appropriately, emphasizing that Patricia's actions were about Patricia's own problems, not about anything Emma did wrong. "Will I see her again when I'm grown up?" Emma asked recently.
That will be entirely your choice, I told her. You never have to see anyone who tried to hurt you, even if they're family. I don't think I want to see her, Emma said thoughtfully. But maybe I'll send her a picture so she can see that I grew up healthy, even though she tried to make me sick. Emma's resilience and wisdom continue to amaze me. She's learned that she has the power to choose who belongs in her life, and that family relationships should be based on genuine love and safety, not obligation or manipulation. David and I are stronger as a couple after surviving Patricia's attempts to destroy our family. We've learned to trust our instincts about people who seem too eager to help or who push boundaries despite being asked to stop. As I write this, Patricia has been in prison for 3 years. She's never attempted to contact us or express remorse for her actions. According to Helen, who occasionally receives letters from her, Patricia continues to maintain that she was trying to help Emma and that we overreacted to her mistake. This lack of insight or remorse confirms that Judge Valdez made the right decision with the lengthy sentence. Patricia remains dangerous to children because she can't acknowledge that her actions were wrong. Emma will turn 7 next month, and we're planning a birthday party with her new friends from our neighborhood. There will be allergy-safe cake, games in our backyard, and the simple joy of childhood celebration without hidden agendas or dangerous surprises. Sometimes I think about the Christmas morning that started this nightmare and how different our lives might have been if Patricia's plan had succeeded. But mostly, I focus on the Christmas mornings ahead, filled with genuine love, actual safety, and the peace that comes from knowing that the people who claim to care about Emma actually do. Emma is thriving, our family is stronger, and justice was served. Patricia's attempt to poison my daughter ultimately poisoned only herself, destroying her freedom and ensuring that she'll never be able to hurt another child again. The Christmas that was supposed to break our family instead revealed our strength, and the woman who tried to be Emma's rescuer became the very danger Emma needed to be rescued from. Emma is safe, Patricia is in prison, and our family's real life, free from manipulation, lies, and hidden threats, can finally begin. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.